Absolutely. Yeah, no. So, really our story begins where, we built our platform based on, the frustrations of platforms like Handshake and LinkedIn, where, what we kind of typically saw, kind of the route that students would pursue to, getting an internship is they'd start off on, Handshake or LinkedIn, apply to dozens, if not hundreds of places, and ultimately get ghosted or, never hear back. Once they kind of exhausted that route, we typically saw students go down, the friends and family route, leveraging personal connections, and so on and so forth. I myself have self-funded my education, so that was never kind of a route that I could lean on. But even for those that could, we found that there was still limited optionality, within it. And then kind of the last route that we saw students always pursue, and it's the one I always did, is you cold email, a few hundred people, hope to get, a few responses and ultimately pray that, it materializes to an offer. We thought to ourselves, there's got to be a better way of kind of going about this. And really our light bulb moment came with my sister. So kind of for reference on my background, I did investment banking on Wall Street at Deutsche Bank. I remember for my internship, I cold emailed 3,000 people and hopped on 300 calls. And I was not the unicorn case. Like, this was the norm. And with my sister, I'd always thought that, this was for, students with great pedigrees, but, lack of experience. My sister's doing investment banking this year at a firm called Lazard, much better than Deutsche Bank. After she got her offer, we were like, why don't we leverage, this junior summer offer to get your sophomore summer internship? And we reached out to 600 PE firms, sent a total of 1,800, emails with follow-ups included, and it led to 3 offers that were all unpaid. And that was really kind of the light bulb moment that this isn't only an issue for students who have, great pedigrees but limited experience. It's also an issue for students who have, great experience and great pedigrees. It's just a broken, right? It's just a broken system. So yeah, really that was kind of our kind of thesis going in. And what we found is the platforms out there were actually built to make students fail. And what I mean by that is, if you go on a Handshake or LinkedIn, the roles on those platforms, there's nothing proprietary about them. The same roles that you'll see on Handshake or LinkedIn, you'll see on Indeed, you'll see on ZipRecruiter, you'll see on Simplify, you'll see on all these other platforms. And so that was kind of issue number one. Issue number two, which ultimately also, kind of screws the company over, is now there are these, kind of softwares and plugins that are coming out that allow you to apply in a single click. Simplify is kind of the one that's famous for this. And so what ends up happening is, since these platforms are not like actually sourcing new roles and are just scraping the same ones that everybody scrapes, what ends up happening is now, instead of 1,000 students applying to those same 100 roles, now you have 10,000 students applying to those same 100 roles. And so it's just screwing everybody over. It's kind of the same, issue that goes on with, the Common App, right, with colleges. And so we're trying to solve that. And the way we're solving that, on the student side is, one, we have, exclusive roles on our platform. We source all of our roles. Two, we pre-filter roles before we show them to students, before we market them to students. So, for example, we won't advertise a role to hundreds or thousands of students. We'll do 2 rounds of pre-screening. And, if a company is looking to fill 2 roles, so we'll market that to perfect fits. So meaning 10 or 15 students roughly. So it ensures that if a student sees the role and they apply, their chances of getting it are going to be very, very high. And then the last 2 aspects that I think are very, very neat and make us unique are, one, we only allow students to apply to 1 opportunity at a time. This allows companies, or this ensures that companies don't waste their time interviewing candidates who don't have the best intention of moving forward should they receive an offer. But the caveat to that is we require companies to get back to students within 7 days of applying on whether they've been accepted, rejected, or moving forward in the process. There's clear timelines. On average, companies get back within 4 days of applying. We have an over 80% offer rate among students on our platform, and no student needing to apply to more than 2 places to get, an offer, essentially. We're very, very proud of that. And then what we found as well is that Handshake and LinkedIn suck at serving these early stage to middle market, companies. I'd argue they suck at serving every company, but I think really where the pain point is felt the most is really at that, early to kind of middle market stage where you might not have an HR or you might have a lean HR. And what we found is that companies at this stage typically hire via personal connections, alumni connections, or even just student cold email inbound. And their two biggest pain points are that one, they have limited time, which is one of their most finite resources. And two, in some cases, they might have, capital. And if they use Handshake or LinkedIn, it contradicts those two, fundamental principles, which is one, it can be costly, but let's say cost isn't an issue. The time issue is frankly bigger, which is there is so much noise. You'll make a posting on there, you'll get 1,000 candidates, 99% of them aren't even relevant. 1% are good fits, and then the amount of time and money they have to burn through vetting those candidates, it's just a nightmare. And it's ultimately why they stray away and they really kind of take a more colloquial approach via, their network referrals, that sort of thing. So we're all ultimately trying to put them on the map, and the way that, we ultimately are solving these issues are, one, we find them bespoke quality fits right off the bat. We've recently, as I mentioned, partnered with, an incredible company called Rounds. We're looking at, potentially joining forces, down the road. Essentially, Rounds has helped us, really find the needle in the haystacks. And what I mean by that is they're literally killing leak code. So as you know, the fundamental issue with leak code, with, with Cluely coming out and all these, is that there are a lot of engineers that are cheating on leak code. And leak code, here's the thing, leak code was fundamentally flawed from the get-go, right? It didn't really test, engineers deep enough, at a scale where they couldn't, ChatGPT, the question. So what Rounds is doing is it tests at a much deeper level that's not easily ChatGPTable. But two, it tests on two other components that are very, very big, which is how well students are able to leverage AI, which is fundamentally important to see how quickly students are able to iterate. And then the last aspect that it tests on is how well, like on the spot scenarios, right? So like live scenarios, how well, students are able to kind of think on their feet in a live, situation. So just kind of for reference in terms of how powerful Rounds is that obviously, we've had some students who have ended up at FANG who've scored extremely high on the platform. But we recently had, a student from UCF, University of Central Florida, which, as you know, is not like a target, school. And he ended up testing really, really well. And shortly after, he actually got a job at Notion, doing software engineering. So we're really, we're not only able to attract exceptional talent to our platform, but we're also able to identify great talent. Because I think the challenge that companies are facing is now with AI, ChatGPT, and even like a lot of software is emerging where you put in the job description, you put in your resume, and it optimizes, your resume, kind of the keywords of your resume with AI. It's really hard to identify, great talent. They might look really nice on paper, but then, materially, it's very tough. So we've kind of found that secret sauce on identifying that great talent. So, that first aspect I was saying is we find bespoke, quality fits right off the bat. we primarily target students from top 40 schools, not entirely by choice. That's, kind of, it's for other reasons. I can't quite disclose, I guess, but yeah. And then the third aspect is we streamline the entire hiring process. So yeah, we take care of talent acquisition, pre-vetting, management, offer letters, IP contracts, you name it. And so yeah, we're really built to serve. I would say most of our clients fall between pre-seed and Series C. Really, companies that have like 50 employees or less, that don't have a formal HR or maybe a small HR. That's really kind of our bread and butter. And here's the thing. That's the majority of the market. There's about 3,900 public companies in the United States, which, Handshake, that really falls into kind of Handshake's bread and butter. Handshake's got about 800 companies that they serve, obviously very large, so they have multiple roles per company. But there's about 100,000 startups in the United States that fall between the seed to Series C range. So it's a much, much larger, demographic. I'd say that most of our clients fall between kind of the seed and Series B range. And yeah, I mean, we're really trying to. We like to say we're the first platform that's not screwing over the student, right? We're big believers in that. If we're able to provide a phenomenal student experience, we're as a result going to be able to provide a really, really great, company experience. And ultimately, I think the biggest challenge that we're trying to solve is eliminate noise and find quality, perfect fits, right, for companies right off the bat. And then on the student side, it shouldn't be where you have to apply to 200 places just to even get an interview. Like, that is so broken. And I think, so many platforms that are coming out are actually, I mean, they provide this short-term satisfaction that actually provide very big long-term consequences, which is, yes, it's very nice to, apply in one click to somewhere. We still do the one-click apply, but the difference is we have these systems, in place where we're not advertising stuff to, hundreds of thousands of students. We're a lot more precise on how we move. So yeah, that's subscription intern as a whole in a nutshell, essentially. Yeah. So just to make sure I'm understanding this correctly. So what is the advantage if they were to apply to us over, let's say, just apply to that same company? Well, here's the beauty in it is that we essentially eliminate the need, for students to network, right? To have to do this insane networking. We literally bring, I'd almost like to say, we bring the super day to them. There's pros and cons to that, but there's pros and cons to everything. So the pro to that is, look, like, if the student is seeing the role, they're competing against 10 or 15 students, right? So meaning if they apply, their chances are going to be really high. I mean, we're essentially, they're in the final round. It's frankly on them to lose it from there, right? Like, it's, I think that's kind of the beauty on it is that they don't have to, network and talk with the, at that point, it really boils down to merit, right? And good fit, right? Merit and good fit, but it's an interview thing. It's not like who I know or who did I speak with, that, that sort of thing, right? So I think that's really the beauty in it. The con to that is that you could sign up to our platform, and look, this might change. I think we're seeing how we're approaching these systems, but the con is that if you sign up to our platform, there's no guarantee that you'll ever see a role, right? That's kind of the con. But our view is, look, like, we don't want to waste students' time, because there's nothing more frustrating to me that when you were applying and, like, you literally get ghosted and you don't hear back. I mean, I'm still getting rejection letters from places I applied 2 years ago, which is just absurd. Like, it's a nightmare. So yeah, I mean, the con is, like, look, like, there's no guarantee that you'll see a role. But the pro is that if you sign up and you do see a role, like you're going to have a very, very high chance and you're going to have a great experience because you're going to know how quickly you're going to hear no if there's a no. You're going to know how quickly, on whether you're moving forward. Like it's just very, very clear timelines of expectations. So yeah, I mean, and look, here's the thing. We're a year-round internship platform. And here's kind of the beauty in it is we're able, and we've attracted exceptional talent, meaning students who are interning at Amazon, who are interning at the NVIDIAs of the world, and who are interning at all these amazing famed companies. The thing though is that during the summertime, yes, that talent might not be as accessible. However, we really like during the summertime, we really pride ourselves in finding, I would really say like the middle buckets of these 1% schools, which is exceptional talent, but it's maybe the students who were, product wise or talent wise exceptional, but maybe not as well in terms of networking and that sort of thing, right? Not as refined in terms of playing the system, because at the end of the day, it is kind of playing, landing, you can be a really, really good interviewer, and that doesn't always translate to, being really good in terms of output, right? So maybe from a name brand perspective, we're not attracting the best of the best because, I mean, our companies are more middle market, right, during the summertime. But during the school year, which is what we've, is really where we thrive, is we have been able to attract that talent. People who work at Centerview, Goldman, Amazon, NVIDIA, all these amazing, students, intern at these early stage startups. And it's a win-win because for the startup, it's great. They're getting this exceptional talent, without having the, commitment of a, full-time employee. They're really able to, test them out. And it's great for the student, because they want to have, the safety net of, that big corporate job, but they, maybe long term, they have, the dream or the vision of starting their own thing, right? So they want to dip their feet in a startup or a PE firm to really, experience that before they head back to the big corporate jobs. That's, really kind of, what we've been able to do there. Sorry, I didn't know if I heard correctly. Bear with me. And so, if you said if somebody was trying this for next semester, how should they approach it? Yeah, absolutely. I would say really that the number what we've kind of identified is we serve three buckets of students so very well. I'd say originally we kind of envisioned, okay, like we were going to serve, the freshmen and the sophomores very well. What's actually ended up happening is we don't always serve maybe quite the freshmen. I mean, for some roles, just, depending on really what kind of the company's looking for, right? And how much they're, willing to, I guess, kind of train up. But really what we've seen is where we serve students very, very well is students who, want internships that ultimately lead to full-time roles. And then two, kind of like what I was explaining, which is students who want to use an internship as a experimental learning experience. So my advice is, look, like we've grown substantially in the sense that we're currently serving about 75 companies. We've placed over, 140 students across those 75 companies. We have about 3,000 students on our platform who are seeking internships. Up until now, we've been adding about roughly, I would say, 15 to 18 companies a month. In just the last 2 weeks alone, we've added 20 new companies. So we're really seeing kind of like this, kind of a more of a hockey stick effect, happening. Hopefully we can, end a month with about 40 companies, newly added to the platform. So it's really kind of an exciting time where, we're constantly bringing on new roles. a lot of, companies move, a lot of these startups move very fast. They're not as forward thinking, meaning when they approach us, it's now we're seeing, I think, startups, a little bit more of the companies that are coming onto our platform say, hey, we want, students a few months down the road, but a lot of them are like, hey, like, we need talent now, or we're considering talent now, right? So yeah, I mean, it's kind of a great time, right? And look, on average, these companies are filling about 2 roles per company. So if we're bringing on 40 new companies in a month, that's 80 new roles, right? So yeah, I mean, it's very exciting. So my advice to students would be, sign up and yeah, I mean, look, we're trying to partner with more student clubs. We've primarily, the way we've brought on students onto our platform is through, club partnerships, also, partnering with like sororities, fraternities, that sort of thing. But yeah, and even just like, professor relationships, relationships with TAs, things like that. But yeah. So sorry. So you said, what is the talent pool that they can expect? Yeah, so I would say that most of our students fall between kind of sophomore, junior, senior, and master students. So we do undergraduates, graduates, and PhDs, but I would say most of them fall within that range. So yeah, I mean, we do a lot of master students, and just at the undergraduate level, I would say kind of our bread and butter is from sophomore to senior. But I think, look, here's the beauty in it as well, is we're actually looking as well, like, maybe a little bit longer term. I'm a believer in like, you need to focus, because if you try and do a lot of things, you end up doing nothing good, right? So like, we're very, very hyper focused right now, but I think long term, we'd love to expand into like the top 1% of high schoolers. And I think the way we're able to do that is because we have this partnership with Rounds, and we're able to identify the needle in the haystacks. Like, we don't need a pretty piece of paper to find the great talent. We're actually, we have measurable data that is able to essentially tell us, like, hey, this student is truly exceptional. So yeah, I mean, I think that's what really excites us, is that we've got the secret sauce to finding those A plus students. Absolutely. Engineers, I'd say, we serve 3 buckets. So we do software engineers. We offer 16 different verticals to choose from. So like, a few that come to mind are AI, ML. That's a big one. Data science. We've even had a company want cloud computing. So we can get very, very granular. We also do biz dev. So really anything from customer outreach to market research. And then the last bucket is finance. We primarily serve a lot more startups than investment firms. We'd love to have more investment firms, but I think it's kind of a culture thing. They're just a little bit more rigid when it comes to that sort of thing. But yeah, I mean, we have students who as I mentioned, are working at companies where they're building out cloud infrastructure. So students building out LoRa models and LLMs. I mean, really, I don't want to go as far as saying, these students are like fractional workers, but I would say they're a degree below that, right? Is really, startups use us not as like necessarily a hiring pipeline solution, or our clients don't necessarily see us as like a hiring pipeline solution, but they really see us as like bringing on these students to drive value in the business. They're at an early stage. They want to keep teams lean. They want quality over quantity, and that's exactly what we're trying to solve. You're able to, rather than having to outsource to an offshore developer, God knows halfway across the world. Correct. You can have somebody here in America that is truly exceptional. So yeah, that's. And yeah, I mean, look, I think that's the goal. I think in terms of like the startups that we best serve, I mean, we work with, a handful of YC startups. We work with many Techstar startups. We work with a lot of, kind of heavily funded, startups, from New York and San Francisco. But I would really say the startups that we are best serving are those startups in like these kind of tier 2 cities, right? Like Austin, Atlanta, Miami, Chicago, right? That typically aren't as heavily funded, are a little bit more bootstrapped, and finding great talent is really tough, right? Like they have to be more dollar conscious, right? And look, like we serve the YCs and the Techstars of the world very well, but I don't think there's as much of a pain point just because they have money to throw at the issue. There's still a struggle of finding quality talent, but they can afford to kind of burn through a little bit more, while somebody in kind of these other cities not as much. So I think that's who we serve exceptionally well, which, as you know, that's the majority. The YCs and the Techstars of the world, those are just a select few, right? So yeah, and then I think long term, look, like for like a large enterprise of SpaceX, like we can't serve a company like that, right? They have infinite money to kind of throw at the issue. However, I think they do have an issue where, like, look, they can eventually find the best talent because they can kind of outpay their way to that. But I think for maybe like that tier down, let's say a Johnson and Johnson, or maybe like a Walmart who's getting outcompeted by a Thing, right, which is still like exceptional. I think that's where we could really help, long term, right? As I mentioned, I think with rounds, we're really able to find, tier one talent. And yeah, I think we'll be able to, help those sort of companies in a little bit of a different way. I think we have, a few things to kind of develop out to really make it a no-brainer. But rest assured, we have, a lot of exciting things in the future that are brewing that are, I think, gonna change, how hiring is done. I mean, that's kind of our goal really, I think the fundamental issue as well is there are kind of like two problems, which are, I think, students are not there's this issue that, like, you have to be more like selective, and I think you do have to be more selective. But I think if you're able to target a much larger audience of students, you're able to attract better talent. And I'm a tennis player, so I'll compare it to tennis. In the 60s and the 70s and the 80s, American tennis was number one. And it was number one because Europeans and the Russians didn't really have like the same, I guess, kind of opportunities that the Americans had, and they couldn't really, there's more restrictions in terms of traveling and so on and so forth, right? But then when eventually there was kind of an even playing field where everybody could compete, the Russians, the Europeans have dominated since, and it's because they're hungrier, they're not that the Americans aren't hardworking, but it came down to a merit thing, not to a privilege thing. And I think that's ultimately what we're trying to do is make it where we're able to really level the playing field and make it purely based on merit and not based on kind of these other outside factors. I guess I could go deeper into that, but yeah, that's kind of the overview of our thesis. Absolutely. So we actually currently work with a Singaporean VC. It was kind of primarily through an intro. My co-founder's dad, he worked in Singapore for many years, and so we kind of got introduced that way. So yeah, it's absolutely. I think that's kind of where we'd like to eventually head to, is being able to really serve these kind of European Asian markets that want amazing, American talent, right? I think kind of like the beauty as well, and something I didn't, mention before or kind of roughly mentioned is we get students subsidized by the university. So we're able to kind of almost do like a price arbitrage with the amount of kind of subsidies that we're able to get for the students. So theoretically speaking, it's actually cheaper for the company to use us than it is to hire a student on their own end, unless they do the whole subsidy thing through their end, which is just it's a lot of paperwork. So yeah, I mean we essentially take care of that. But yeah, I mean look, we're trying to partner with more like VCs. We've partnered with a few accelerators. So we actually recently partnered with an accelerator in New York called the IndieBio. They're the biggest biotech accelerator in the United States. We also recently partnered with an accelerator that primarily serves MIT and Harvard founders. It's called the TNT Accelerator. And we're in conversations with a few economic development programs. And so yeah, it's very, very exciting. But I mean, yeah, I mean, we're looking to partner with a lot more accelerators, help VCs and their portcos and that sort of thing. I'm sorry. Yeah, so I think that's kind of the beauty in it is that you create a profile once, right? You can update it, whenever you want. It takes literally 90 seconds to 2 minutes, to create a profile. So very, very low friction, for the student. And then once you've done that, you just wait. I mean, that's pretty much it. And once an opportunity comes, there's no long application. It literally, you can apply in 2 clicks, which is, you know, hey, I want to apply and confirm that you want to apply. It's literally that simple. And then from there, we'll send over, the assessment, if you end up passing kind of that initial screening. So yeah, I mean, it's very, very low friction for the students. It's not like Workday, where you had to do these like essentially like spit out your resume every single time. Like, yeah, like I'm like, why even attach your resume? Like, this is like ridiculous. Yeah, I mean, I think this is where it might change, long term. I think we might not just do like where students are only able to apply to one, but maybe like to a few. I think having the restricted, apply makes it where students are more intentional, right? But the thing is, you could theoretically see infinite roles. You're just only able to apply to one. So once you apply, you cannot see any more roles until you're essentially, eliminated from the process, which theoretically you're going to know within 7 days on whether you're moving forward, rejected or hired, right? Within applying. So it's very, very clear. But yeah, theoretically speaking, you can see infinite. But I think, yeah, I mean, if we, longer term, I think we will always have kind of that restricted apply where they can't just apply to infinite. I think that is a much better approach than just. Yeah, so we provide support, not just, we don't only provide great hires, but we provide great support beyond the hire. And so kind of for reference, I mean, industry averages on, the upper quartile in terms of speed are, anywhere from 60 to 90 days to, hire somebody. On our end, on average, our companies take about 2 to 3 weeks to fully onboard students. We've even done it as quickly as 7 days. So we move very, very fast on our end. And then in terms of support, we have, somebody on our team integrate as a supervisor within the company Slack or, preferred communication channel, essentially providing support to both students and companies to ensure that, deliverables, expectations, timelines are being met. We're actually in the process of, seeing maybe building out an AI agent, that can, potentially do that. The thing is, I think kind of our motto behind everything is we want to do everything exceptionally well. And I rather sacrifice scale a little bit and do something exceptionally well than be very, very large and do something mediocre. So that's our approach at Subscription Intern if it's not somebody who's, integrated within the Slack, we have to be absolutely confident that it's the best service possible. So yeah, that's kind of what it looks like when students are hired. So sorry, could you repeat that last part? The last part. So yeah, I think, and this is kind of more of a long term play. I think here, kind of to what you're saying is, I think the beauty of our platform is we keep track of, previous, experiences on the platform. We also keep track, of feedback and the experience of the student and the company. So what is this going to evolve into? It's going to evolve into, a marketplace where eventually companies, let's say, a student intern somewhere for 6 months and they, want to work at a larger company that's also in Subscription Intern. Now you're going to be able to see employer history and like actually concrete employer history, not just kind of taking the student's word, based on, a letter of recommendation or which who knows, what's going on nowadays with that, right? So, so I think that's kind of the beauty is yeah. I mean, we're going to be very, we're going to be a data provider almost to a degree, right? Which is phenomenal. To what you're saying in terms of like it, it ranking the company higher. I don't know. I think I think, look, we'll have kind of that student experience where they'll be able to say, like, hey, this founder was like really great to work with. Maybe this founder not as good. But I think there's going to be that infrastructure in that ecosystem where there's going to be a lot of transparency in terms of experiences and that sort of thing. Because I think something that's really hard to tell as well, like when you look at resumes, is like a resume and an experience could look really, really good. There's a big difference in there's students who are very surface level in terms of the experience where they didn't do anything, and there's students who had a really deep, exceptional experience. So I think being able to really uncover that without having to, again, it being in the interview, but rather in a more concrete, objective manner, I think is going to be, very, very big. Yeah, absolutely, and I think that is something we're looking, down the road. I think there's a few people in that space, kind of younger startups that are doing it very, very well. They've kind of taken a different angle, but I really do think we have kind of a secret sauce where we can look at the end of the day. It's like one of the biggest pain points is there's a lot of noise, and companies like struggle to find quality candidates, and I really do think we have the formula to finding those quality candidates. So yeah, I mean, doing something down the line that expands to not only interns is definitely something we're exploring. There's a lot of avenues to take, and we're really excited that we kind of see these possibilities, and hopefully it continues to materialize and so forth. But yeah, we're it's definitely something we're exploring. No, and let me see if I'm understanding this correctly. Yeah, I mean, I think really kind of the beauty is there are so many great companies out there, and I'll kind of give an example is like, from I'm obviously more familiar with like the finance world, right? Like, if you were to tell me, hey, Emilio, like you didn't end up at the Goldman, you didn't end up at whatever, and I had the option between going to Johnson and Johnson as a financial analyst or working at some really good middle market private equity firm, in terms of like career opportunity doors, things like that, the private equity firm is much, much better. But I think a lot of students, those roles are not on marketplaces. That's kind of the thing. Like the Johnson Johnsons are. Exactly. I think we can flood, the market with a lot of opportunities that just weren't on a formal marketplace. And I think that's going to be really great. And here's the thing. I think our winning formula is the systems that we've put in place to provide a great experience, right? Like, look, is it going to solve the issue? Like, life is competitive. You know what I mean? Like, it's simple as that. But I think it shouldn't be where you're receiving hundreds of rejections just to get a maybe. You know what I mean? And I think that's ultimately what we're trying to solve is provide a much better experience, a cleaner experience to the student, which in turn also provides a much better experience to the company. Absolutely. No, I think we'll definitely develop an app, down the road. I think that's a no-brainer. I think first is first, we got to make the, web platform really great. Once we've kind of done that and tackled that, I think we can start kind of developing these other things. But yeah, no, that's definitely in the books. It's funny because I was always against it, it being on an app, but it seems like students really like that like informality and kind of ability to just kind of casually apply. I see the value in it in where it's just gonna attract more like student engagement. I think that's kind of the thing, right? Like it's it might provide a better student yield. I think that's what it will ultimately turn out to. Absolutely. No, and I think that's that's the goal is to make it as frictionless as possible, make it very easy. It shouldn't be intimidating. I think those applications, I mean, look, like there is ultimately like a high friction barrier, which is the assessment, which is 45 minutes. But at that point you've the applying is easy, and like in terms of like at that point whether you're a top contender. And I, in my opinion, I think that's got to bring more motivation to the student, right? Because it's not like everybody's given these assessments. These assessments are going to be given to hey, like if you're a top student for a top contender for this job, you're going to be given the assessment, right? So yeah, I think it's the goal is to make it as frictionless as possible in a manner that's just beneficial to everybody. So let me understand that correctly. Could you repeat it? Sorry. Absolutely. And I'm glad I'm glad you brought up that point because I think sorry to the recruiters I know out there, but I think we're gonna, eliminate the need for recruiters because I think the issue is like, look, like recruiters do not have domain expertise. And so the issue is like, yeah, like I mean, I think, like I said, I think from a merit perspective, we're going to be able to find the best talent, right? And it's because we have, these systems in place. We're obviously, rounds is, primarily for technical students right now, but we'll be developing, I think the process from a soft skilled perspective and a technical perspective on the business development and finance front is very flawed. And I'll give you an example. Interviewed, probably a year ago, maybe a little bit more, at this, big private equity firm, and I was in the, final interview. And before I did the super day, they made me take this like a behavioral test that essentially assessed my character, right? Well, anyways, it spit out the results, like it spit out like the assessment right afterwards, and it said that I was shy, that I was not sociable. I'll let you make your own conclusions. But the crazy thing is decisions like that are being made, and I think where the system is flawed a little bit is that there's this big emphasis on rating the student, but I think there's also, I think you also have to not rate, but like you have to assess the company, meaning the most qualified candidate doesn't ultimately always translate to the best fit for a company. And I'll give you an example. And I get that I have to kind of set these expectations sometimes. Where I'll get a startup, a very young startup, who's like, look, like, I just want to do list building. Like, I need somebody to build out lists, right? But I want an MBA. And I'm like, you're not like, an MBA is like, it's like, you want Toyota performance and you're getting or you want Ferrari performance, but you want the reliability of a Toyota. You know what I mean? Like that just doesn't. Correct. So yeah, and like, look, vice versa as well. Like in the sense that I talk with startups, and I'm like, look, like they're like, hey, like we want to build like role models, an undergraduate should do, and we're like, no, I think maybe a little bit higher up just based on your needs. So I think there needs to be something that takes into consideration both, and I think that's kind of what we're looking to build. But it's very, very flawed. The system is very, very flawed on like the soft skill side of things. But kind of getting back to to the recruiter aspect is if we can actually have like material data as to why somebody's good over just kind of the instinct of a recruiter who doesn't have like domain expertise, that's going to be significantly better because we're going to be able to really get students who are like I said, not just sounding good or looking good to the recruiter, but rather like materially better. So yeah, I mean that's the long term vision. Not where we're at right now, but yeah. Absolutely. And yeah. Yeah, and kind of getting at that, it's funny because I mean, this is not only an issue for like kind of what we've spoken about. This isn't only an issue for like early stage startups. Like, it's very predominant, even like at companies who have the money to throw at the issue. And I'll give an example. I was at Saster, and I was talking to this founder who had raised $50 million, right? Like who had done very, very well for himself. Like they were in, I think, like a Series C. And he's like, look, man, like I don't have a sourcing issue. I have a qualifying issue. And essentially, like, he painted the picture. He's like, look, like, I can, make a posting, not a job posting, like literally a post on LinkedIn, tell people to, send me their resume. He's like, I can get 1,000 resumes, in my inbound next morning. He's like, the issue is, out of those 1,000, only 20 of them are going to be relevant to what I even, wanted. Out of those 20, I'll email the 20. 10 will ghost me. So now I'm left with 10. Out of the 10, half of them don't even know the name of my company because they just, sent the resume without even looking. And now I'm left with 5, and only one of them ends up being and it's just, it's a nightmare, right? And it's like rinse and repeat, until you eventually just kind of have to conform to, whatever's out there, right? So yeah, I mean, we're confident that, we've been solving that issue, and that we'll be able to, continue to solve that issue. Absolutely. Yeah, no, happy to. I'll share my screen. Oh, one that's where, we might be biased, but yeah, I mean, we definitely think that. So in terms of, subscription intern, this is us. Just kind of a quick overview. I mean, you can see, some of the companies we work with, some testimonials, questions, things like that on the student side as well. Notice, I mean, we've had some students from, Carnegie Mellon, Rice. I mean, we've had Caltech, Yale. They should all show up on here, and we even show kind of where they've gone on, to work as well. So it's, where they interned, which is the blue, and then, kind of offers they've gotten beyond that. So, really, really great. And then, in terms of signing up for a company, it's, very simple. Click here. If you're a company, you can essentially, book a call on our Calendly. We'll walk you through, a demo. And, if you're a student, very easy to sign up. I mean, this is, pretty much it. And yeah, you're in our system. And then, for rounds, um, it's yeah, I mean, really great. Fardeen and Rafe, they're the, founders of Rounds. Absolutely, crushing it. The actual assessment is called Code Brain, and yeah, I mean, this is, essentially how it works. I think if, as a student or as a company, you can, sign up on there. Let's see what other. To be honest, I haven't gone too much over their website. Looks good. Um, yeah, and then funny enough, they actually made they started off as like a interview, kind of like a glass door, but a little bit more transparent. No pun intended there. And so, here they still have that part of the website where you're able to see, students' experiences on job interviews and things like that, right? How many rounds, mid-level intern, that sort of thing. But yeah, I mean, it's really great, and we're really excited as to, what we can continue to build, in the future. I think it's to be decided at the moment, but I think if if we were to come together with, which I think is, very, very likely, we might just kind of create a new name, if that makes sense. But not. I mean, it hasn't been, the name part hasn't been heavily discussed. I think we're, trying to see how we can, continue to really build, each other's platforms out, and really kind of create a winning solution for our clients. yeah. So right now we have a larger surplus of finance students than what we would like, more than on the engineering and biz dev front. So yeah, I mean, if there are VC firms, P firms out there that are looking for world class students, I mean, we have them. So I mean, we could find them some really exceptional students very, very quickly. Yeah, so we do everything, right? So we do like remote, hybrid, in person. So typically like a company is, obviously like we'll have a company say like, hey, like I want in person, I want hybrid, whatever. So I don't know if there's like if this is exactly kind of, what you're saying, but yeah, I mean, we're transparent in that. So yeah, I mean, if students are seeing, let's say an in-person one, and they apply, they are aware that it's going to be, in person, right? And vice versa. So I don't think we're doing anything different there. We're just being transparent, and yeah, I mean, essentially that sort of thing. But maybe there is a way to kind of spin it where there is a way to kind of gauge, or measure, I guess, willingness to relocate, that sort of thing. Sorry if I misheard. What would I recommend if they want to go ahead and use the platform today? Yeah, I mean, look. So one thing that I guess that earlier student should know about subscription intern to essentially help them increase their chances of getting hired. Look, I think what we're trying to fundamentally change, and we're definitely bullish on this, is that I think that um, we're moving in a world where experience is going to be, look, like going to a good name school is obviously very important. Having good grades is going to be very important, but that in no way, like when you're competing for these top 1% jobs, that is the bare minimum. Everybody has that. That is not the differentiator. So when you're looking at resumes, I think that's kind of what made my sister and I really stand out. And just kind of for reference, I mean, I both my sister and I, self-funded our educations, or my sister's still self-funding her education. I just graduated, but I didn't have connections, right? And really where I stood out was I interned at a VC before a year before even starting college, and then freshman year interned, at a small investment bank for 8 months. And here's the thing, and I think this is where students get caught up, is I think the differentiator is you could tell this between good, like good and great candidates, is that the good ones will have like a 2-3 month internship experience, yeah, at the big name place, earlier on, right? Like, the freshman, sophomore year. But that I much rather take the one that worked at a middle market firm for 8 months, right? Because I know that they actually drove value in the process. They actually learned, things. So I think what we're trying to really promote students to do, and I think this is part of an educational curve, is like we're trying to get students to do more internships. That is the key to, standing out in these competitive processes. So yeah, my advice would be do more internships, use subscription intern, and if you can't, use subscription intern, obviously, reach out, go through it, and send those cold emails and try and get those, early internships. And that's really what's going to make you, I think, stand out, not only for our platform, but I think just in general, right? Because, as I mentioned, I think the expectation nowadays is like good grades and going to a good school. Like, how many students are competing for jobs on Wall Street at these firms? How many students? And there's a bunch of other great, there's 20 other schools that are, you know, equal, nearly as good, right? So how do you differentiate? And I think, where you start is, experience. That's kind of how your the piece of paper stands out, and kind of get that foot in the door. And then from there, it might be kind of more merit, and maybe networking, things like that. But I think that's really the key, and that's kind of what we're trying to promote students to do more of. No, absolutely. I think that's the goal of our platform is, I'd like to say I've been really fortunate where I've kind of met the right people at the right time. The harder you work, the luckier you get. But at the same time, there's always going to be a degree of luck, right? I've been very, fortunate to, have great mentors at the right time. And yeah, like going into college, not to go too far back in the story, but like I borderline didn't graduate high school, and I took a gap year not by choice, but because I kind of had to, because I mean I was going to end up at a community college, and eventually got myself to work hard, and academically. Look, I wanted to play professional tennis. I got injured. That door ended up shutting, and I hated academics. I was never. It was honestly the yeah, exactly. Yeah, and so I got my life together. But the thing is, I always had to work really hard to discovering that kind of common knowledge that was common knowledge for other people. Like I graduated high school and I didn't even know what an SAT was, right? Um, I think that's ultimately what we're trying to provide is where like students don't need to come in knowing the secrets of like how to network, how to send cold emails, how to do all of this, but where they're able to go to a platform and apply and look like you know where they're tested based on their skills, not based on really something that's maybe not in their control, if that makes sense. Absolutely, absolutely. No, and I my co-founder and I mean, we take this very very seriously, and that's kind of what I've said before, which is we really want to provide an exceptional experience. That's really our goal. If that means sacrificing scale earlier on, we're absolutely okay with that. But fundamentally, we want to provide a really really great, world class experience to both students and companies. So yeah, I mean, look, we make our money via companies, so we're B2B, we're free platform for students. I mean, I've heard a lot of different words. I mean, as like a general space, I think we're in the ed tech space. I've heard that we fall in the career tech, and you could I didn't I hadn't. I hadn't heard of that either till like a week ago. And you could even argue maybe even like recruiter tech, which, but yeah, I mean, I'd say, look, I mean, we serve companies, we serve, these early stage, the kind of middle market companies, and, that's ultimately the core of our business. So yeah, I mean, look, we're looking to, right now in terms of what we're looking to do when we raise is capital. Look, capital is always great in terms of, it adds fuel to the fire, but we're at a stage where, we're bringing in good enough revenue where we're self-sustaining, we're, technically profitable. And so really what we're looking for is, an investor, a strategic, investor, somebody who can open doors. That's really kind of what we're looking for, right? That can connect us with more accelerators, more VCs who we could partner with and serve their porticos, maybe serve their large ecosystem of startups, that sort of thing. I think that's really what we're looking for in an investor. So yeah, that's correct. Correct. We're very it's a very capital efficient business for the most part. Look, I think that's kind of like the beauty in anything that starts off as like a service, right? Like you don't need a lot of upfront capital. Long term and kind of what we're developing into is, right now we're maybe a little bit more tech enabled. Eventually we'll be kind of more like self serve, fully AI. But yeah, I mean I turned down my Wall Street job to do this. I'm all in, right? And I eat, sleep, and breathe this. And I think really, in all honesty, I never saw myself building a startup. I've always been very, very entrepreneurial. I've always, had kind of side hustles and yeah, I've always been very entrepreneurial, but I never thought I was smart enough to start a startup. And I think really kind of the beauty of subscription intern is like we have with what we're kind of merging together, with rounds is, we have deep technical expertise. I mean, Fardeen is, an AI consultant at Deloitte. He's 21 years old and, he graduated a year and a half ago with his master's from Georgia Tech, which is, just, genius, right? And, Rafe, he's a software engineer at Salesforce. So, I mean, just exceptional backgrounds. And I think, our team combined is truly, truly exceptional. And I think, look, I think in part, we're obviously in the business of, delivering a really great product, but from a scale perspective, we're in the relationship business, right? And so I think that's what that's where kind of my expertise kind of come more into play is seeing that vision and then, being able to, scale in that sense is building those relationships and so forth. So yeah, we're excited. We're all in, and this is our vision. And so yeah. Absolutely. And look, like we focus on kind of a niche very, very well right now. And what we've discussed over this podcast is I think we'll cover a lot of different niches very, very well long term. But yeah, I mean, I think we are, a no-brainer hiring solution for really any startup that, wants to keep a lean team, that, wants to prioritize, quality over quantity. And yeah, I mean, we like to, we think that we pride ourselves in finding, exceptional hires. So yeah, we'd love to work with, any startup that wants to, needs to hire great students. Yeah, that covers everything. Thank you so much, Anderson, for having me. This has been amazing. Really great questions, very well thought out, and really appreciate the time. Yep. Absolutely. Well, no, Anderson, I really appreciate this. This was great speaking with you, and I'm excited for us to continue our relationship, and this has been great.